The White House cafeteria lady had been serving presidents for 12 years. Same hairnet, same quiet smile, same forgettable face behind the lunch counter. When the nuclear alert siren screamed and Secret Service rushed the president to the bunker, she simply walked past every checkpoint, through every locked door, into the most classified room in America. Because the woman they thought was just dishing out mashed potatoes had the highest security clearance in the building, and a kill count that would make Navy SEALs look like Boy Scouts. Welcome to Secrets Never Told. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden identity and deadly secrets, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These are the secrets that were never meant to see daylight. Her name was Margaret Chen, but everyone called her Maggie. For 12 years, she had been as much a fixture in the White House as the portraits on the wall. Same navy blue uniform, same plastic hairnet, same gentle smile as she ladled chicken parmesan onto the plates of senators, generals, and cabinet members who barely acknowledged her existence. The executive dining facility buzzed with its usual lunchtime energy. Chief of Staff Bradley Morrison grabbed his usual turkey sandwich without looking up from his phone. Defense Secretary Catherine Walsh nodded politely as Maggie served her the daily special. Deputy Director of the CIA Michael Torres made small talk about the weather while she filled his coffee cup. None of them knew that Margaret Chen held a security clearance higher than all of theirs combined. Tuesday started like any other day. Maggie arrived at 5:30 a.m. through the staff entrance, passing through the same metal detectors, submitting to the same security procedures she had endured for over a decade. Her ID badge, worn and faded, bore the designation Food Services Level 3 Clearance, standard for cafeteria workers who might overhear sensitive conversations. What the badge didn't show was the invisible biometric chip embedded beneath the plastic, a chip that could open doors most people didn't even know existed. By 11:30 a.m., the lunch rush was in full swing. Maggie worked methodically behind the serving line, her movements efficient but unremarkable. She listened to the familiar chatter of DC's power elite, discussing budget appropriations and diplomatic strategies between bites of her carefully prepared meals. Senator James Crawford complained about overseas deployment costs while loading his plate with roast beef. "These black ops programs are bleeding money," he muttered to his aide. "Half of them we don't even know exist." Maggie's hand didn't pause as she served him mashed potatoes, but her eyes flickered with something that might have been amusement. If only he knew that the woman serving his lunch commanded a budget larger than most small countries' entire defense spending. What Senator Crawford also didn't know was that his aide, David Kim, had been flagged by Phantom Division for suspicious contact with foreign nationals. The young man who took notes on classified conversations had been photographed 3 times in the past month, meeting with individuals connected to North Korean intelligence. Maggie had already placed microscopic surveillance devices in his briefcase during one of his lunch visits. At exactly 12:47 p.m., everything changed. The first alarm was subtle, a low tone that most visitors mistook for a routine test, but Maggie recognized it immediately. Her movements slowed imperceptibly as her brain shifted into a different mode, processing threat levels and response protocols that had been drilled into her decades ago. Code 7, imminent nuclear threat. All assets to maximum readiness. The second alarm was unmistakable, a piercing wail that sent immediate panic through the dining facility. Emergency broadcasts began echoing through the building's speakers. "This is not a drill. All personnel report to designated safe zones immediately." Chaos erupted. Senators dropped their forks. Cabinet members abandoned their lunch trays. Secret Service agents materialized from seemingly nowhere, speaking rapidly into their sleeve microphones as they began herding VYPS toward secure exits. "What's happening?" Defense Secretary Walsh demanded as Agent Martinez appeared at her elbow. "Ma'am, we need to move you to the secure area now," Martinez replied tersely, not bothering to explain that preliminary reports suggested incoming ballistic missiles with nuclear capabilities. Through it all, Maggie continued cleaning plates, but beneath the serving counter, her fingers found a concealed panel and entered a 6-digit code. Across the building, 13 other Phantom Division assets received an encrypted pulse that told them everything they needed to know. Agent Martinez himself was one of them. The Secret Service agent who had been protecting government officials for 8 years was actually Phantom Operative 7, embedded in the Secret Service to monitor threats from within the security apparatus itself. His real name wasn't Martinez. It was Captain James Wilson, former Army Delta Force, recruited by Phantom Division after a classified operation in Syria where his entire unit was killed, except for him. "Ma'am," a young Secret Service agent approached Maggie's station. "You need to evacuate with the rest of the staff." Maggie looked up with the same mild expression she wore when asking if someone wanted extra gravy. "Of course, dear. Just let me finish cleaning up. The agent hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and courtesy, then hurried away to help with the more important evacuees. He had no idea he'd just spoken to someone who could kill him in 17 different ways with the serving spoon in her hand. As the dining facility emptied, Maggie methodically removed her hairnet and apron. Underneath, her Navy uniform revealed details that no one had ever noticed. Subtle reinforcements around the collar, slightly modified pocket placements, and a belt that was designed for purposes far beyond fashion. She walked calmly to a utility closet that most people assumed contained cleaning supplies. Her ID badge didn't just beep at the scanner. It triggered a secondary authentication system that analyzed her retinal patterns and verified her palm print in less than 2 seconds. The lock disengaged with a soft hiss, revealing not cleaning supplies, but an arsenal that would make Special Forces units envious. Kevlar vest, tactical communications gear, and weapons that officially didn't exist. Maggie suited up with practiced efficiency, transforming from cafeteria worker to lethal operative in under 90 seconds. The closet was deeper than it appeared, leading to a service corridor that most White House staff had never seen. Maggie moved through it with the confidence of someone who had memorized every inch of the building's hidden infrastructure. She wasn't just familiar with these passages. She had helped design them during the security upgrade in 2018, when everyone thought she was just a cafeteria worker concerned about food delivery routes. Meanwhile, 3 levels beneath her feet, the nuclear alert wasn't a drill. Deep beneath the White House, in the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, the most powerful people in America were gathering to manage what appeared to be an imminent nuclear threat. The president had been rushed from the Oval Office to a bunker designed to survive direct nuclear impact. But there was a problem. "Sir, we've lost contact with Raven's Nest," reported Communications Director Sarah Phillips, her voice tight with controlled panic. "The primary satellite link is down, and we can't establish secondary protocols." President William Harrison looked around the bunker at his assembled advisors, the Joint Chiefs, the National Security Council, the most experienced crisis managers in the government. All of them were staring at communications equipment they didn't fully understand, realizing that their connection to America's most critical intelligence assets had been severed at the worst possible moment. "How long to restore communications?" the president demanded. "Unknown, sir," replied General Patterson. "The system requires specialist access codes that aren't available to standard personnel." "What do you mean, not available?" Chief of Staff Morrison snapped. "This is the White House. We should have access to everything." General Patterson exchanged a glance with CIA Deputy Director Torres. "Sir, there are certain systems that operate on a compartmentalized basis. Even at our clearance levels, some protocols are need-to-know only." "Need to know?" President Harrison's voice rose. "I'm the damn president. What could I possibly not need to know?" The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. They were the most powerful people in the world, surrounded by the most advanced technology on Earth, and they were as helpless as children because they didn't have the right passwords. Outside the bunker, Phantom Operative Martinez was coordinating with building security, ensuring that all evacuation protocols were being followed. But he was also receiving updates through his encrypted earpiece about the real situation developing above ground. "Phantom 1, this is 7, he whispered into his sleeve microphone. "Primary package, secure in location Charlie, awaiting your arrival for Phase 2 authorization." "Copy, 7, came Margaret's voice through his earpiece. "Phase 2 is go. Maintain cover until resolution." That's when the bunker's main door opened with a soft hiss, and Margaret Chen walked in. The silence was profound. Secret Service agents reached for their weapons before recognizing her face, the cafeteria lady who had served them lunch an hour ago. But something was different about her now. Gone was the slightly stooped posture and shuffling gait. Her movements were now precise, controlled, predatory. The Navy uniform she wore was clearly tactical gear, and the equipment strapped to her body was military grade. "Excuse me," stammered Agent Harrison, not the president, but a different Agent Harrison who worked protective detail. "Ma'am, you're not authorized to be in this area." Maggie didn't respond to him. Instead, she walked directly to the communications console that had been dark since the crisis began. She placed her palm on a scanner that most people in the room didn't even know existed. A scanner hidden beneath what appeared to be a standard control panel. The scanner flashed green, and suddenly banks of equipment that had been dark began lighting up with activity. Displays that hadn't shown any data for the past 20 minutes erupted with information streams from satellites, ground stations, and assets around the globe. "Communications with Raven's Nest restored," she announced in a voice that was no longer gentle or deferential. The tone was crisp, authoritative, commanding. "Satellite links reestablished. Threat assessment protocols online. Global asset asset network activated. The transformation in her voice was so complete that several people in the room actually stepped backward. This wasn't the same person who had been serving them lunch. This was someone else entirely, wearing the same face. President Harrison stared at her, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "Who the hell are you?" Maggie turned to face him, and for the first time in 12 years, she dropped her carefully maintained facade completely. The transformation was startling, not just in posture and voice, but in the very way she seemed to occupy space. She had become someone entirely different. "Mr. President, my name is Margaret Chen, operational designation Phantom 1. I am the director of Phantom Division, a black operations unit that officially doesn't exist. I've been embedded here as your cafeteria worker for the past 12 years, maintaining operational security for assets and protocols that require absolute compartmentalization." The room erupted in confused voices, overlapping questions and demands for explanation. President Harrison raised his hand for silence, but it was the look in Margaret's eyes that actually quieted the room, a look that promised consequences for anyone who interfered with what she was doing. "Phantom Division?" the president asked carefully. "I've never heard of any Phantom Division." "That's intentional, sir. Phantom Division operates under presidential authority dating back to 1962, but with a need-to-know basis so strict that knowledge of our existence is limited to 3 people in the entire government. You're about to become the 4th. She activated a display showing presidential authorization codes going back 6 decades. Every president since Kennedy has been briefed about Phantom Division at some point during their term, usually during a crisis that required our intervention. The briefings are never recorded, never documented, and the knowledge dies with each president. See, a deputy director, Torres, stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. "This is impossible. I'm the deputy director of the CIA. I would know about any intelligence operation of this magnitude." Margaret looked at him with an expression that was polite but absolutely deadly. Her smile was the same one she'd worn while serving him coffee for 12 years, but now it carried an entirely different meaning. "Deputy Director Torres, your clearance level is insufficient for Phantom Division operations. In fact, your name appears in our files as a potential security risk due to your connections with Chinese intelligence assets through your wife's import business and your son's girlfriend, who works for the Ministry of State Security." Torres went pale, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. That's classified information." "Not to me," Margaret replied simply. "I'm the one who classified it." She brought up a file on Torres that made him stagger backward. Photos of his wife meeting with Chinese nationals, financial records showing payments from shell companies, even recordings of private conversations in his home office. The surveillance had been comprehensive and ongoing for years. General Patterson, a man who had commanded troops in 3 different wars and faced enemy fire without flinching, found his voice trembling slightly. "Ma'am, with all due respect, how do we verify anything you're telling us?" Instead of answering directly, Margaret moved to another console. Her fingers danced across controls with practiced efficiency, bringing up displays that showed satellite feeds from around the globe. But these weren't ordinary intelligence images. They showed ongoing operations, assets in position, and real-time assessments of threats that made the assembled officials realize how little they actually knew about America's true defensive capabilities. The nuclear alert was triggered by what appeared to be incoming ICBMs launched from a submarine in international waters, she explained, pulling up tracking data. However, Phantom Division assets identified the missiles as decoys approximately 8 minutes ago. The warheads contained sophisticated electronic warfare packages designed to simulate nuclear signatures while delivering conventional explosives. She switched to another display, showing a complex web of global communications intercepts. The real threat is a coordinated cyber attack designed to disable our command and control systems while foreign operatives attempt to infiltrate critical infrastructure. The missile alert was meant to focus our attention skyward, while the real attack came through digital channels and human assets already in position. A new display appeared, showing a map of the United States with pulsing red dots scattered across major metropolitan areas. These are confirmed infiltration teams that crossed our borders over the past 72 hours using diplomatic cover, student visas, and business credentials. They're targeting power grids, communication networks, transportation hubs, and water treatment facilities. President Harrison leaned forward, his political instincts warring with genuine alarm. "How did you know about this when our entire intelligence community missed it?" "Because Phantom Division has assets embedded in organizations that your intelligence community doesn't know exist, sir. We've been tracking this operation for 6 months, allowing it to develop so we could identify all participants and roll up the entire network simultaneously." She pulled up personnel files that made several people in the room step back in recognition. recognition. Photos of foreign nationals, some of whom had been guests at White House functions, others who had been seen around D.C. political circles for months. One photo showed David Kim, Senator Crawford's aide, meeting with a man identified as Colonel Li Wei of Chinese military intelligence. This operation involves sleeper agents who have been in position for years, waiting for activation. Some of them have security clearances. Some of them have access to your personal staff. Her eyes swept the room meaningfully. Some of them are people you trust. Chief of Staff Morrison, who had been silent until now, spoke up with barely controlled panic. If this Phantom Division is so capable, why haven't we been briefed on their activities? Why all the secrecy? Margaret's smile was thin and cold, the expression of a predator who had been underestimated for far too long. Because you leak information, Mr. Morrison. Your phone calls to Jennifer Walsh at the Washington Post are monitored. She's not just a reporter. She's an intelligence asset for a foreign government. Your girlfriend Rebecca Martinez works for a Romanian intelligence service that contracts with Chinese handlers. Morrison's face drained of all color. His hands began shaking as the implications sank in. You can't prove any of that. I don't need to prove it in court, Margaret replied, her voice carrying a finality that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. I just need to contain it. She gestured to the displays showing the infiltration teams. Sir, we have approximately 14 minutes before these teams reach their primary targets. I need your authorization to activate Phantom Division's response protocols. What kind of response protocols? President Harrison asked, though part of him already knew the answer wouldn't be something he wanted to hear. The kind that permanently neutralize threats to national security, Mr. President. The kind that end problems instead of managing them. The weight of her words settled over the room like a physical presence. This wasn't about arrests or diplomatic protests or sanctions. This was about elimination. Permanent, final, irreversible elimination. Defense Secretary Walsh found her voice. You're talking about assassinations. Multiple assassinations. On American soil. I'm talking about protecting American lives, Margaret corrected. These aren't misguided activists or political dissidents. These are trained operatives whose mission is to cripple our infrastructure and kill civilians. They're enemy combatants operating in a war that most Americans don't even know is being fought. She activated another display showing detailed profiles of the infiltration teams. 47 confirmed hostiles across 12 states, plus support networks that bring the total to approximately 200 targets. Each team is equipped with military-grade explosives, cyber warfare tools, and biological agents designed to contaminate water supplies. 200 people, President Harrison repeated slowly, the number seeming to echo in the bunker. 200 enemies of the United States who are currently preparing to cripple our infrastructure and kill American civilians, Margaret corrected. The same way I've eliminated over 300 similar threats during my 12 years of service here. Threats that would have resulted in tens of thousands of American deaths if left unchecked. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the room was recalculating everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman who had served them lunch every day for over a decade. The realization was staggering. They had been eating meals prepared by someone who was possibly the most dangerous person in America. You've killed 300 people? Defense Secretary Walsh whispered, her voice barely audible. I've neutralized 300 threats to national security, Margaret corrected, her tone matter of fact. Including a North Korean assassination team that attempted to poison your coffee with ricin in 2019, Secretary Walsh, a Russian operative who tried to seduce your chief of staff to gain access to NATO deployment schedules in 2020, a Chinese intelligence officer who was planning to kidnap your daughter from her sorority house last month. Secretary Walsh staggered backward, reaching out to steady herself against the wall. My daughter, Sarah, but she's safe at Georgetown, where she's been under Phantom Division protection for the past 3 years, Margaret confirmed. Along with the families of 17 other high-ranking officials who don't know their loved ones are targets. Your daughter thinks her roommate Emma is studying international relations. Emma is actually a former Delta Force operator who can kill 6 different ways with a textbook. The revelations were coming too fast, each one more shocking than the last. The people in the bunker were beginning to understand that their entire perception of their safety, their security, their very reality had been an illusion maintained by someone they had never truly seen. President Harrison looked at the displays showing the closing threats, then at the advisors who were supposed to protect the nation but had been caught completely off guard. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier. How do I know you're telling the truth? He asked. How do I know this isn't some elaborate deception? Instead of answering directly, Margaret pulled up a classified file on the main screen. It was President Harrison's own psychological profile, complete with personal details that only he should have known. His childhood fears, his recurring nightmares about nuclear war, before, his secret doubts about his ability to handle a real crisis. The assessment included predictions about how he would respond to various crisis scenarios, including this exact situation. "We've been preparing for this conversation for 3 years, Mr. President," she said quietly. "We know you'll authorize the operation because you understand that sometimes protecting innocent people requires eliminating guilty ones. And we know that afterward, you'll carry this burden for the rest of your life, just like every president before you." The president studied the woman who had served him countless meals, who had smiled politely when he complained about the food, who had been invisible for over a decade while managing threats he never knew existed. In her eyes, he saw not just competence and determination, but the weight of decisions no one should have to make. "Do it," he said finally. Margaret nodded and began entering commands into the console. The displays showed a map of the United States transforming into a battlefield grid. Across the country, assets that had been waiting in position received simultaneous signals through encrypted channels that bypassed every known intelligence network. The operation lasted exactly 28 minutes. When it was over, Margaret turned back to the stunned officials in the bunker. "Threat neutralized, Mr. President. Infrastructure security restored. The nuclear alert can be rescinded." "What happens now?" President Harrison asked. "Now you forget this conversation happened," Margaret replied, her voice returning to its familiar gentle tone. "Tomorrow morning, I'll be back in the cafeteria serving breakfast, and you'll continue believing I'm just the nice lady who makes your coffee exactly the way you like it." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Morrison, you'll be receiving a new phone tomorrow. Your old one had some security vulnerabilities. And Mr. Torres, your wife's import business will be closing due to unexpected tax complications. I'm sure you understand." As she left the bunker, President Harrison realized he was looking at someone who wielded more real power than anyone else in the room. Power that operated in the shadows, protected by invisibility, and enabled by the fact that no one ever looked closely at the people who served them. The next morning, Margaret Chen was back behind the serving counter, wearing her hairnet and plastic gloves, ladling oatmeal with the same gentle smile she'd worn for 12 years. When President Harrison came through the line, she looked up at him with polite recognition. "Good morning, Mr. President." "The usual." He stared at her for a moment, searching her face for any sign of the lethal operative who had saved the nation the day before. But there was nothing, just the familiar, forgettable cafeteria worker who had become part of the White House furniture. "Yes," he said finally, "the usual." As she handed him his coffee, their fingers brushed for just a moment. In that brief contact, he felt the calluses on her hands, not from years of kitchen work, but from weapons handling and combat training. "Have a wonderful day, sir," she said with that same warm smile. And President Harrison realized that he would never again underestimate the quiet people who moved through his world unnoticed, because somewhere among them were guardians whose very existence depended on remaining invisible. Some secrets are too dangerous to reveal. Some heroes are too valuable to acknowledge. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody notices until it's too late. Margaret Chen returned to her work, protecting a nation that would never know her name, eliminating threats that would never make headlines, and serving coffee to people who owed her their lives without ever realizing it. Because that's what phantoms do. They protect the light by mastering the darkness, and they disappear so completely that even their victories become invisible. The perfect secret never told.